The sun beat down mercilessly on the parched earth of Red River, New Mexico, in the summer of 1874, and Natalie Zimmerman stood at the edge of her dying homestead, wondering how many more days she could survive without water before the desert claimed her life just as it had claimed her father's 3 weeks before. She was 22 years old, alone in a territory that showed no mercy to the weak, and the well her father had spent 2 years digging had finally run completely dry. The creek that had once flowed a quarter-mile from their small cabin had become nothing more than a cracked riverbed, and the nearest town, with a functioning well, was 10 miles away through terrain that would kill a person on foot in this heat. Her father's 2 horses had died within days of each other, their bodies now buried behind the barn that was falling apart board by board. Natalie wiped the sweat from her forehead with a cloth that had once been white but was now the color of rust and dust. Her dark hair hung in a long braid down her back, and her dress, though mended countless times, was still respectable enough. She had been a schoolteacher back in Missouri before her father had convinced her to join him in this God-forsaken place, promising her a better life, land of their own, freedom from the constraints of civilized society. He had been a dreamer, her father, and his dreams had killed him. She walked back toward the cabin, her boots crunching on the dry earth, when she saw the figure approaching from the north. At first, she thought it might be a mirage, something her desperate mind had conjured from the heat waves that shimmered across the landscape. But as the figure drew closer, she realized it was real. A man, massive in build, leading a pack mule and walking with the steady, purposeful gait of someone who knew how to survive in this harsh land. Natalie's hand instinctively went to the rifle leaning against the cabin doorframe. She had learned quickly that being a woman alone in the territory meant being prepared for the worst, and while most men who passed through were decent enough, there were always exceptions. She picked up the rifle and held it loosely at her side, watching as the man approached. He stopped about 30 feet from the cabin, raising one hand in a peaceful gesture. "Madam," he called out, his voice deep and carrying easily across the distance, "I am not here to cause trouble. I saw your place from the ridge and thought you might need help." Natalie studied him carefully. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sun. His hair was dark brown, hanging past his shoulders in waves that suggested he spent more time in the wilderness than in any barbershop. His face was weathered and tanned, with a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of beard. He wore buckskin pants and a simple cotton shirt that stretched tight across a chest and arms thick with muscle. A wide-brimmed hat shaded his eyes, but she could see they were a light color, perhaps blue or gray. "I do not need help," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the lie. "I'm doing just fine." The man looked around at the dried-up land, the dead plants, the obvious signs of abandonment and desperation. "Madam, I do not mean to contradict you, but this land looks like it has not seen water in some time. You're well? None of your concern, stranger." He nodded slowly, accepting her hostility without offense. "My name is Logan Vance. I'm a trapper mostly, but I know these mountains and this desert better than most. I've been ranging through these parts for near about 8 years now." "Natalie Zimmerman," she replied after a moment, lowering the rifle slightly but not putting it down. "And what brings a trapper down from the mountains in the middle of summer?" "Trading post in Taos," Logan said. "But I saw smoke from your chimney last week when I was passing through the high country, then did not see it again. In this heat, a person does not stop cooking unless something is wrong. So I decided to swing by and check." It was a kindness she had not expected, and it made her throat tighten with emotion she could not afford to show. "My father died 3 weeks ago. Heart gave out while he was trying to dig deeper in the well. The water table dropped, and we could not reach it anymore." Logan's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Zimmerman. That's a hard way to lose someone." "Everything about this place is hard," Natalie said bitterly. "He promised me it would be better here. Instead, it killed him, and now it is going to kill me too." "It does not have to," Logan said quietly. He glanced around again, his eyes moving over the landscape with the practiced assessment of someone who understood the land intimately. "How deep is your well?" 20 feet, maybe 25. My father was not a small man, but the heat and the work wore him down. He could not dig any more, and I tried, but I'm not strong enough to break through the rock layer he hit." Logan was quiet for a long moment, and Natalie could see him thinking, weighing options, considering possibilities. Finally, he spoke. "There is water under this land. The mountains feed aquifers that run through this whole region. Your father was probably close when he hit that rock layer, maybe just a few feet away from breaking through to good water." "What good does that do me?" Natalie asked, hearing the desperation creep into her voice despite her best efforts to contain it. "I cannot break through rock." "No," Logan agreed, "but I can." Natalie stared at him, not understanding. "Why would you do that? You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Logan met her eyes steadily, and she saw something in his gaze that made her heart skip. It was not pity, which she could not have borne. It was something else, something deeper and more complicated. "Because you need help, and I can give it. Because leaving you here to die would be a stain on my conscience I could not wash away. Because maybe this is where I am supposed to be right now." "I have no money to pay you," Natalie said. "Everything we had went into this land, and now it is worth nothing without water." "I'm not asking for money," Logan said. He hesitated, then added, "I'm asking for your trust. Let me help you. Let me see if I can bring water to your land. If I succeed, you can stay here and make a life. If I fail, well, at least we tried, and I will take you to Taos where you can figure out what comes next." Natalie felt tears prick at her eyes, and she blinked them away fiercely. She had been alone for 3 weeks, rationing the last of her water, knowing that death was approaching with each sunrise. And now this stranger, this mountain man with kind eyes and impossible strength, was offering her hope. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Logan smiled, and it transformed his rough features into something almost gentle. "Because someone helped me once when I needed it most, and because I have a feeling about you, Miss Zimmerman. A feeling that you are supposed to survive this, that you have more life ahead of you than behind you." Natalie lowered the rifle completely and leaned it back against the doorframe. "How long would it take? To dig through rock?" "Hard to say without seeing it," Logan admitted. "Could be a few days, could be a few weeks. Depends on how thick the rock layer is and what kind of rock it is. But I have tools, and I have time, and I have done this kind of work before." "I only have water for maybe 3 more days," Natalie said quietly. 4 if I stretch it." Logan nodded and moved to his pack mule, untying one of the large sacks secured to its back. He carried it over and set it down near the cabin door with a heavy thud. "I have 10 gallons here. It is not a lot, but it will keep us both going while I work. And there is a spring about 2 miles up in the foothills that is still running. At least it was when I passed it yesterday. It is a hard climb, but I can make trips up there to refill if we need more time." "Us?" Natalie asked. "You are planning to stay here?" "If you will allow it," Logan said. "I can camp outside, away from the cabin, so you feel safe. But yes, if I am going to dig your well, I need to stay close to the work." Natalie looked at this stranger who had walked into her life like an answer to a prayer she had been too proud to speak aloud. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to protect herself, to maintain her distance. But another part of her, a deeper part, recognized something in Logan Vance. A goodness, a strength that was not just physical, but moral. A man who did what was right because it was right, not because it benefited him. "You can stay," she said finally, "and thank you, Mr. Vance, truly." "Logan," he corrected with another of those gentle smiles. "If we are going to be working together to save your land, we should use first names." "Logan," Natalie repeated, testing the name on her tongue. "And you should call me Natalie." "Natalie," he said, and the way he said it, with a softness that seemed at odds with his powerful frame, made something warm unfurl in her chest. That afternoon, Logan inspected the well while Natalie prepared a sparse meal from her dwindling supplies. He lowered himself down on a rope, taking a lantern with him, and spent a long time examining the rock layer her father had encountered. When he climbed back up, his face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but his expression was hopeful. "It is limestone," he said, accepting the cup of water she offered him. "That is good news. Limestone is hard, but it is not impossible. And I could hear water when I pressed my ear to the rock. There is definitely an aquifer down there, probably not more than 5 or 6 feet below the current bottom of the well." 5 or 6 feet through solid rock," Natalie said. "That could take forever." 2 weeks, Logan said with confidence. "Maybe less if the rock has natural fractures I can exploit. I have drills and hammers designed for this kind of work. It is slow going, but it is possible." 2 weeks, Natalie repeated, the time frame seeming both impossibly long and miraculously short. "And you are willing to spend 2 weeks of your life digging through rock for a woman you just met?" Logan looked at her with those steady, light-colored eyes that she could now see were indeed blue, a pale blue like the sky on a winter morning. "I told you, Natalie. I have a feeling about this, about you. And I learned a long time ago to trust those feelings." Over the next few days, Natalie learned what it meant to watch someone work with the kind of dedication and strength that seemed almost superhuman. Logan began each morning before dawn, lowering himself into the well with his tools and working until the heat of midday forced him to take a break. He would emerge covered in rock dust and sweat, his muscles gleaming in the harsh sunlight, and Natalie would have water waiting for him and whatever food she could prepare from their limited supplies. In the afternoons, when the heat was too intense for work in the confined space of the well, Logan would rest in the shade of the cabin, and they would talk. Natalie learned that he had come west from Virginia after the war, unable to return to a home that no longer existed and a family that had been scattered by the conflict. He had worked as a scout, a guide, a trapper, and a dozen other jobs that required strength and wilderness knowledge. He had never married, never settled down, always moving from place to place like a tumbleweed. "I always thought I was looking for something," Logan told her one afternoon as they sat in the shade together. "Some place that felt like home. But I never found it, so I just kept moving." "And now?" Natalie asked. "Are you still looking?" Logan glanced at her, and there was something in his expression that made her heart beat faster. "Maybe I found what I was looking for, and just did not recognize it until now." Natalie felt her cheeks flush, and she looked away, focusing on the horizon. "You cannot mean that. You barely know me." "I know you are brave," Logan said quietly. "I know you stayed here alone after your father died, trying to survive against impossible odds. I know you have not complained once about the heat or the hardship or the fear. I know you are stronger than you think you are." "I am not strong," Natalie said, her voice breaking slightly. "I am terrified all the time, terrified that you will give up, that the water will run out, that I will die here alone in this place that killed my father." Logan reached out and took her hand, his palm rough and calloused against her softer skin. "You will not die here, Natalie. I promise you that. Even if I cannot bring water up from the ground, I will get you to safety. But I do not think it will come to that. I can feel that water down there. I can hear it calling to me through the rock. It is going to give way soon." His confidence was infectious, and Natalie found herself believing him despite the evidence of her own eyes. The pile of broken limestone beside the well grew larger each day, but the work was slow. Logan would emerge from the well with his hands bleeding despite the thick gloves he wore, his arms trembling from the effort of swinging the heavy hammer hour after hour. But he never complained, never suggested giving up, never showed anything but determination. By the end of the first week, they had gone through most of the water Logan had brought with him. He made 2 trips up to the spring in the foothills, leaving before dawn and returning after dark with the heavy water containers. Natalie begged to go with him, to help carry the burden, but Logan refused. "The climb is too dangerous for someone who does not know the terrain," he said firmly, "and I need you here, safe. You are the reason I am doing this, Natalie. You are what keeps me going when every muscle in my body is screaming at me to stop." His words sent warmth through her entire body, and Natalie realized with a start that she was falling in love with this man. It seemed impossible, impractical, the kind of romantic foolishness she had always scorned in novels and poetry. But love, she was discovering, had its own logic that had nothing to do with practicality or sense. It grew in the spaces between words, in shared glances across a dusty yard, in the way Logan looked at her like she was something precious worth fighting for. On the 9th day, Logan hit water. Natalie heard his shout from inside the cabin where she was mending one of his shirts that had torn on the rock. She dropped everything and ran to the well, her heart pounding, afraid to hope but unable to contain it. "Natalie!" Logan's voice echoed up from below, triumphant and filled with joy. "I broke through. There is water down here." She leaned over the edge of the well, peering down into the darkness where Logan's lantern cast dancing shadows. "Are you certain? Is it fresh?" "Crystal clear and cold as mountain snow," Logan called back, "and flowing fast. This is a good, strong aquifer. You will never run dry again, not from this source." Natalie felt tears streaming down her face, and she did not bother to wipe them away. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it," Logan corrected. "Your father brought it this far. I just finished what he started." It took another 5 days for Logan to complete the work, widening the breakthrough, reinforcing the walls, installing a proper pump mechanism, and ensuring that the water would flow freely and safely for years to come. And when he finally climbed out of that well for the last time, covered in mud and rock dust but grinning with satisfaction, Natalie did not think about propriety or caution or anything except the overwhelming gratitude and love that filled her heart. She threw her arms around him, not caring that he was filthy, not caring about anything except that he was there, solid and real and hers. Logan stiffened in surprise for just a moment, then his arms came around her, lifting her off the ground with easy strength as he held her close. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for saving me." Logan set her down gently but did not release her, his hands resting on her waist as he looked down into her face. "Natalie, I need to tell you something. These past 2 weeks, working beside you, talking with you, learning who you are, I have come to care for you deeply, more deeply than I have ever cared for anyone. I know it is too soon. I know I should give you time, but I cannot leave here without you knowing how I feel." "Logan," Natalie said, her hands resting on his broad chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath her palms. "I feel the same way. I've been trying not to, trying to tell myself it is just gratitude or loneliness or desperation, but it is not any of those things. It is real. You are real. And what I feel for you is real." Logan's eyes searched her face, and she saw hope and joy and something fierce and protective that made her feel safer than she had ever felt in her life. "Then let me stay," he said, "not as a hired hand or a temporary guest, but as your partner. Let me help you build this land into something beautiful. Let me build a life with you." "Yes," Natalie said without hesitation, "yes to all of it." Logan smiled, that gentle smile that transformed his rough features, and then he was kissing her, his lips warm and sure against hers. Natalie kissed him back with all the passion and gratitude and love that had been building inside her for the past 2 weeks, and she felt like she was finally, truly coming home. That evening, they sat together by the well, watching the sun set over the mountains and listening to the beautiful sound of water flowing freely. Logan had his arm around Natalie's shoulders, and she leaned against his solid warmth, feeling a contentment she had not known was possible. "We need to make plans," Logan said practically. "This land has good water now, but it needs work. The barn needs repairs, the fences need rebuilding, and you will need livestock and crops if you want to make a real go of it." "We," Natalie corrected with a smile. "We need to make plans. We will need all those things." Logan kissed the top of her head. "We," he agreed. "I have some money saved from my trapping, not a fortune, but enough to buy supplies and a few head of cattle. And I know people in Taos who owe me favors. We can get this place running properly within a few months." "What about your trapping?" Natalie asked. "I do not want you to give up your life for me." "I'm not giving up anything," Logan said firmly. "I'm gaining everything I've ever wanted, a home, a purpose, you." He paused, then added, "But if you are willing, I would like to make trips up into the mountains during the winter when the farm work is slower. The fur trade is still good, and the extra income would help us build security." "I think that sounds perfect," Natalie said, "as long as you always come back to me." "Always," Logan promised. "You are my home now, Natalie. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." They married 3 weeks later in Taos, with Logan's trading partner and the local preacher as witnesses. Natalie wore a simple blue dress that Logan bought for her from the general store, and Logan wore clean buckskins and a new shirt. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Logan kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. They returned to the homestead as Mr. and Mrs. Vance, and Logan threw himself into the work of transforming the struggling property into a thriving farm. He repaired the barn and the fences, built a chicken coop and a smokehouse, and helped Natalie plant a vegetable garden that flourished with the abundant water from the well. They purchased 6 cattle and a breeding pair of pigs, and Logan constructed proper pens and shelters for all the animals. The work was hard, but it was good, and they did it together. Natalie had never been happier. She would wake each morning to find Logan already up, seeing to the animals or working on some project, and she would watch him from the cabin doorway, still amazed that this strong, good man was her husband. He would catch her watching sometimes and smile at her with such love that it made her breathless. At night, they would lie together in the bed Logan had built for them, a sturdy frame of pine with a thick mattress filled with fresh straw and covered with quilts Natalie had brought from Missouri. Logan would hold her close, his powerful arms wrapped around her, and they would talk about their dreams for the future. Children, eventually, when they were more established, maybe additional land if they could afford it, a trip to see the ocean, something neither of them had ever experienced. "I want to give you everything," Logan would whisper in the darkness, "everything you have ever wanted or dreamed of." "You already have," Natalie would whisper back. "You gave me life when I was dying. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I would die alone. What more could I possibly want?" Their first winter together was cold but manageable. Logan made his promised trip into the mountains in November and returned in February with enough furs to pay for spring planting supplies and a milk cow. He came back leaner and harder, with stories of narrow escapes from bears and blizzards, but his eyes lit up when he saw Natalie waiting for him, and he swept her into his arms like he had been gone for years instead of months. I missed you," he said against her hair. "Every day, every night, I missed you. Next year, if you are willing, maybe you could come with me. I could teach you the mountains." "I would like that," Natalie said, holding him tight. "But not until after the baby is born." Logan went very still, then pulled back to look at her face. "Baby?" Natalie nodded, smiling through sudden tears. "I was not certain until last week, but yes. We are going to have a baby, probably in the late summer." Logan let out a whoop of joy that probably scared every animal on the property and lifted Natalie off her feet, spinning her around carefully before setting her down and dropping to his knees in front of her. He pressed his face against her still flat stomach, his arms wrapped around her waist, and Natalie could feel him trembling. Thank you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for this gift. Thank you for being mine." "We are yours," Natalie said, running her fingers through his long hair. "Both of us, always." Their son was born in August of 1875, during a thunderstorm that broke the summer heat and brought blessed rain to the land. Logan paced outside the cabin while the midwife from Taos attended Natalie, and when he finally heard the baby's first cry, he burst through the door, despite the midwife's protests. "A boy," the midwife announced with a smile. "A big, healthy boy. Takes after his father in size, I would say." Logan moved to the bedside, where Natalie lay exhausted but radiant, holding their son against her chest. The baby had dark hair like both of them, and was indeed large, with strong lungs that he was using to announce his displeasure at being born. "He is perfect," Logan breathed, touching one tiny hand with his large, calloused finger. The baby immediately grasped it, his grip surprisingly strong, and Logan laughed with pure joy. "He is absolutely perfect." "Samuel," Natalie said softly, "after my father. Samuel Logan Vance." "Samuel," Logan repeated, testing the name. "Yes, that is perfect." He leaned down and kissed Natalie gently. "You are amazing. You are the strongest, most incredible woman I have ever known." "Says the man who dug through solid rock for 2 weeks to bring me water," Natalie said with a tired smile. "That was nothing compared to what you just did," Logan said seriously. "You brought life into this world. You gave me a son. There is no greater strength than that." The years that followed were full and good. Logan proved to be a devoted father, patient and loving with young Samuel even when the boy was fussy or difficult. He would carry his son on his shoulders as he did the farm work, talking to him constantly, teaching him about the land and the animals and the rhythms of the seasons. Samuel's first word was Papa, and Logan's face when he heard it was something Natalie would treasure forever. They added to their family slowly: a daughter, Lily, born in 1877, with Natalie's dark eyes and Logan's sunny disposition. Another son, Thomas, in 1879, quiet and thoughtful from the very beginning. And finally, another daughter, Rose, in 1882, who arrived screaming into the world and never really stopped, her personality as vibrant as her name. The homestead prospered, the cattle multiplied, the crops yielded well, and Logan's winter trapping brought in steady additional income. They built additions onto the cabin, adding bedrooms for the children and a proper kitchen for Natalie. Logan constructed a covered porch where they could sit on summer evenings and watch their children play in the yard. Other families moved into the area as word spread about the good water and fertile land. A small community grew up around them, and Natalie found herself with friends and neighbors for the first time since coming to New Mexico. She became known for her kindness and her willingness to help anyone in need, and Logan earned a reputation as a man you could trust, someone who would always keep his word and lend a hand when asked. But through all the changes and growth, through the challenges of raising children and building a life, the love between Natalie and Logan never wavered. If anything, it grew deeper and stronger with each passing year. They still found time to sit together by the well on summer evenings, remembering that desperate time when they had first met, and marveling at how far they had come. "I cannot imagine my life without you," Natalie would say, leaning against Logan's shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "You will never have to," Logan would reply, his arms secure around her. "I am yours for as long as I draw breath, and if there is anything beyond this life, I will be yours there too." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Logan surprised Natalie with a trip to Santa Fe. They left the children with their neighbors, the Harrison family, and rode into the city together, spending 3 days exploring the markets, attending a theater performance, and staying in a real hotel with glass windows and indoor plumbing. "This is wonderful," Natalie said as they strolled through the plaza on their last evening. "But I'm ready to go home." "Are you?" Logan asked, squeezing her hand. "I thought you might enjoy city life." "I enjoy visiting," Natalie clarified, "but our home is where I want to be. Our land, our children, our life together. That is where my heart is." Logan stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "Do you ever regret it? Staying here instead of going back east where life might have been easier?" Natalie looked up at her husband, this mountain of a man who had literally moved mountains for her, who worked himself to exhaustion every day to provide for their family, who loved her with a constancy and depth that still took her breath away. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for one single moment. You saved my life, Logan, in every way a person can be saved, and then you gave me a life worth living. How could I ever regret that?" Logan pulled her close, right there in the middle of the plaza with people walking around them, and kissed her like they were still newlyweds. "I love you, Natalie Vance, more than I have words to say." "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "My mountain man, my love, my home." When Samuel turned 15 in 1890, he began talking about wanting to explore beyond the homestead, maybe work as a ranch hand or a guide like his father had been. Logan, remembering his own restless youth, did not try to hold his son back, but he did sit him down for a serious conversation. "The world can be a hard place," Logan told Samuel on the porch one evening. "Harder than you might think. But it can also be good if you know where to look and who to trust. Your mother and I, we found each other when we both needed someone most. That kind of connection, that kind of love, it does not come along every day. When you do find it, Samuel, do not let it go. Do not let pride or fear or stubbornness keep you from grabbing hold of it with both hands." "Like you did with Mama," Samuel said. It was not a question. "Like I did with your mama," Logan confirmed. "I was a wanderer before I met her, never staying anywhere long, never building anything that would last. She gave me a reason to stay, a reason to build, a reason to become the man I wanted to be. That is what real love does. It makes you better than you were." Samuel nodded thoughtfully, absorbing his father's words. "Did you know right away that Mama was the one?" Logan considered the question carefully. I knew there was something special about her from the moment I saw her standing there with that rifle, trying to be brave even though she was terrified. And I knew I wanted to help her, wanted to stay near her. But love, real love, that grew as I got to know her, as I saw her strength and her kindness and her spirit. By the time I finished digging that well, I knew I could not leave her, and I have never regretted that decision for a single day. In the end, Samuel did leave home for a while, working on various ranches and learning the cattle trade. But he came back 2 years later with a young woman named Emma, a rancher's daughter he had met in Colorado, and Logan and Natalie welcomed her into their family with open arms. They married in the summer of 1892, and Logan helped Samuel build a cabin on the far edge of the family property, keeping the young couple close but giving them their own space. Lily showed no interest in leaving, perfectly content to help her mother with the younger children and the household. She was courted by several young men from the surrounding area, but she was particular, rejecting suitors left and right until a quiet surveyor named Peter came through in 1894 and won her heart with his gentle manner and love of books. They were married that same year and settled in Taos, though they visited the homestead often. Thomas proved to have his father's affinity for the mountains and wilderness, and when he turned 16 in 1895, Logan began taking him on the winter trapping expeditions. Natalie worried every time they left, but she trusted Logan to keep their son safe, and they always returned in the spring with furs and stories and a bond between father and son that was beautiful to witness. Rose, the youngest and most spirited of their children, declared at age 10 that she was never getting married and was instead going to be a doctor. Logan and Natalie, progressive enough to take their daughter's dreams seriously, began saving money to send her to medical school when the time came. "A doctor," Logan said to Natalie one night as they prepared for bed. "Our little girl wants to be a doctor." "Is that a problem?" Natalie asked, hearing something in his tone. "Not at all," Logan said quickly. "I am proud of her ambition. I just worry about her facing a world that might not appreciate a woman doctor." "She is your daughter," Natalie reminded him with a smile. "She has your stubbornness and your strength. She will make the world appreciate her whether it wants to or not." Logan laughed and pulled Natalie into his arms. "You are probably right. Heaven help anyone who tries to stand in her way." As Logan and Natalie entered their 40s and then their 50s, they began to slow down, leaving more of the heavy farm work to Samuel and his growing family. Logan's hair turned silver at the temples, and his body bore the scars and aches of decades of hard labor. But he was still strong, still vital, still the man Natalie had fallen in love with all those years ago. They spent more time together, taking long walks around the property, sitting by the well that had brought them together, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Samuel and Emma had given them 3 grandchildren, and Lily and Peter had 2, with more likely on the way. The family had grown and spread, but it remained strong and close, bound together by love and loyalty and the example Logan and Natalie had set. "Do you remember the day we met?" Natalie asked one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains just as they had done thousands of times before. "Every detail," Logan said, his hand finding hers automatically. "I remember thinking you were the bravest thing I had ever seen, standing there alone against the whole world. I remember the sound of your voice, the look in your eyes, the way you held that rifle like you meant to use it if you had to." "I was terrified," Natalie admitted, "of dying, of being alone, of trusting a stranger, but something in me knew you were different, knew you were safe, knew you were meant to be there." "I was meant to be there," Logan agreed. "I spent years wandering, looking for something I could not name. And then I found you, and suddenly everything made sense. Every hard step, every wrong turn, every lonely night in the wilderness, it was all leading me to you." Natalie leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart, the strength that had never failed her. "You dug through solid rock for me. For 2 weeks, you dug through rock and clay, knowing you might fail, knowing I had nothing to offer you, and you did it anyway." "I did it because I could not do anything else," Logan said simply. "Because you needed water to survive, and I needed you to survive. It was the easiest decision I ever made. And I had fresh water by the time you finished." Natalie said softly. Fresh, cold, pure water that has never run dry in all these years. You gave me life, Logan. In every possible way, you gave me life. Logan kissed her temple, his lips gentle against her skin. And you gave me a home, a family, a reason to be more than I was. We saved each other, Natalie. That is what love does. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had watched over them through all the years of their marriage, through hardship and joy, through struggle and triumph, through everything that makes a life worth living. In 1898, when Logan was 52 and Natalie was 46, they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a gathering of their entire family and half the territory besides. Samuel and Emma came with their children, Lily and Peter traveled from Taos, Thomas brought a young woman he was courting, and Rose, then 16 and preparing to leave for school in the East, helped organize the whole affair with her characteristic energy and determination. They roasted a steer, laid out tables full of food, and danced under the stars to music provided by a group of Mexican musicians from Taos. Logan, his silver-streaked hair pulled back and his best clothes brushed clean, led Natalie in dance after dance, moving with surprising grace for such a large man. You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, Logan told her as they swayed together under the lantern light. More beautiful now than the day we met, if such a thing is possible. And you are still the strongest man I know, Natalie replied, her hands resting on his broad shoulders. Not just in body, though you certainly are that, but in spirit, in heart. You are my rock, Logan Vance, my foundation, my everything. Logan pulled her closer, holding her against his chest as they moved to the slow rhythm of a Spanish love song. Around them, their children and grandchildren danced and laughed, their friends and neighbors celebrated, and the land that had nearly killed Natalie all those years ago flourished green and alive, fed by the water Logan had fought so hard to bring to the surface. 25 years, Logan murmured into Natalie's hair. 25 years of waking up next to you, working beside you, building this life with you, and still, it is not enough. I want 100 more years, 1,000. We have however long we have, Natalie said practically, but her voice was thick with emotion. And we will make the most of every single day, just like we always have. As the night wore on and the celebration continued, Logan and Natalie slipped away from the crowd, walking hand in hand to the well that stood at the center of their property, the well that had quite literally been their salvation. The pump Logan had installed so many years ago was still functional, though it had been replaced and repaired many times over the decades. The stone wall around the well had been reinforced and made beautiful with careful masonry work. It was the heart of the homestead, the source from which everything else had grown. Logan worked the pump handle, filling a dipper with cold, clear water. He drank deeply, then refilled it and offered it to Natalie. She accepted it and drank, the water as pure and sweet as it had been that first day when Logan had broken through the rock layer and given her the gift of life. To water, Logan said solemnly, to the water that brought us together and the water that has sustained us all these years. To water, Natalie agreed, and to the man who brought it to me when I needed it most. They stood together beside the well, listening to the distant sound of music and laughter, feeling the night breeze cool on their skin, living in the perfect moment of a life well lived and a love that had conquered everything thrown against it. Years continued to pass, marked by seasons and celebrations, by births and deaths, by the steady accumulation of memories that make up a human life. Logan's strength remained remarkable even as he aged, though Natalie watched him move a little slower, work a little less, rest a little more. She herself felt the weight of years, the stiffness in her joints, the lines around her eyes that spoke of decades spent squinting into the New Mexico sun. But they still had each other, still shared the bed Logan had built when they were newlyweds, still held hands as they walked around the property they had built together from nothing. Their children were grown and scattered, though Samuel remained on the adjacent property, ready to help with anything needed. Their grandchildren were growing up strong and healthy, benefiting from the security and love their grandparents had created through sheer determination and devotion. In the spring of 1903, Logan found Natalie in the garden, tending to the early vegetables with the care she had always given to growing things. He stood watching her for a long moment, drinking in the sight of her, still amazed after nearly 30 years of marriage that this woman was his. "Natalie," he called softly. She looked up and smiled, brushing dirt from her hands as she rose to her feet. "Yes, my love?" "Come with me," Logan said, extending his hand. "I want to show you something." Curious, Natalie took his hand and let him lead her away from the garden, past the barn, past the chicken coop, to a small rise on the eastern edge of their property. There, Logan had cleared away the brush and rocks, creating a flat, peaceful space with a view of the mountains to the east and the homestead spreading out below. I have been thinking about the future," Logan said as they stood together looking out over the land, "about what comes after us, and I wanted to make sure we chose our place together." Natalie understood immediately and felt tears prick at her eyes. "Here? This is where you want to rest when our time comes?" "If you agree," Logan said, "from here we can watch over everything we built, our children and grandchildren, the land we brought back to life, the water that saved us both. It seems fitting." Natalie leaned against him, feeling his solid presence, his enduring strength, his unchanging love. "Yes," she whispered, "this is perfect. When the time comes, we will rest here together, just as we have stood together through everything life brought us." But that time was still years away. Logan and Natalie had more life to live, more sunsets to watch, more grandchildren to welcome into the world, more memories to create. Rose graduated from medical school in 1906 and returned to New Mexico to open a practice in Taos, making her parents prouder than words could express. Thomas married his sweetheart and took over the winter trapping business from Logan, who finally admitted he was too old to spend months in the mountains. Samuel's oldest son began courting a girl from Santa Fe, and the family prepared for yet another wedding. Through it all, Logan and Natalie remained the center, the foundation, the example of what marriage and love and commitment could be when two people chose each other again and again, day after day, year after year. Neighbors and friends would come to them for advice, for help settling disputes, for wisdom about farming or family or life in general. And Logan and Natalie would offer what they could, always together, always united, always demonstrating through their actions what real love looked like. On a warm evening in July of 1909, Logan and Natalie celebrated their 36th wedding anniversary quietly, with just their immediate family present. Logan was 63 now, his hair completely silver, his face deeply lined, but his eyes still held that same light they had held when he first walked onto Natalie's dying homestead all those years ago. Natalie was 57, her dark hair threaded with white, her hands marked by decades of work, but still beautiful in Logan's eyes. They sat together on the porch after the family had left, holding hands and watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The sound of water from the well, which Samuel had fitted with a small fountain for his parents' 30th anniversary, provided a peaceful background music. "Regrets?" Logan asked softly, as he sometimes did, needing to know that Natalie was still happy with the choice they had made together. "Never," Natalie replied, as she always did, with absolute certainty. "Not a single one. This life, this family, this love, it is more than I ever dreamed possible. You are more than I ever dreamed possible." Logan lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I dug through rock for you, and you gave me the world in return. That seems like a pretty good trade to me." Natalie laughed, the sound still bright and young despite the years. "You worked for 2 weeks, barely sleeping, bleeding, and exhausted, breaking through solid stone to bring me water so I would not die. And you think that was a good trade for what I gave you?" "The best trade ever made," Logan confirmed seriously, "because what you gave me was not just a home or a family or even love, though you gave me all those things. You gave me myself. You gave me a reason to be the man I always wanted to be. You saw something in me worth saving, worth building a life with, and that belief transformed me." "You were always that man," Natalie said, touching his weathered face with gentle fingers. "I did not transform you. I just gave you a place to be who you truly were." They sat in peaceful silence as the night deepened around them, two people who had become one through years of shared labor and shared joy, shared hardship and shared triumph. Their love had started with a desperate act of service, a mountain man digging through rock and clay for 2 weeks to bring water to a dying woman, and it had grown into something vast and enduring, something that had created ripples spreading far beyond themselves. Around them, the homestead settled into sleep, the animals in their pens, the crops in the fields, the water flowing clear and cold from the well that had saved them both. Samuel's house showed lights in the windows where his family prepared for bed. In Taos, Rose was likely reviewing medical journals in her small apartment above the clinic. Lily would be reading to her children before tucking them in. Thomas was probably camped somewhere in the foothills, checking his trap lines and sleeping under the same stars his parents now watched. All of it, every bit of this vast, complicated, beautiful legacy, had begun with an act of love. With a stranger who saw a woman in need and decided to help, not because there was anything in it for him, but because it was the right thing to do. And that woman had seen past the rough exterior to the good heart beneath and had trusted him with her life, her future, her heart. "I would do it again," Logan said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "If I had to live my whole life over, make every choice again, I would still walk onto this property on that hot July day. I would still dig that well. I would still fall in love with you. I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," Natalie said softly. "Even knowing all the hardships we would face, all the struggles and the sorrows, I would still say yes when you asked to stay. I would still marry you. I would still build this life with you. Because the joy has outweighed the sorrow 1,000 times over." Logan pulled her close, and they sat together under the stars, two people who had become one, who had built something lasting and good from nothing but determination and love and the pure, sweet water that flowed from a well dug through solid rock by a man who could not bear to let the woman he loved die alone. And when they finally rose and walked together into the house they had built with their own hands, they moved as one, in perfect synchronization, the way people do when they have spent a lifetime learning each other's rhythms. They prepared for bed with the easy intimacy of decades, and when they finally lay down together, Logan gathered Natalie close against his chest the way he had done every night of their marriage. "Good night, my love," he whispered into her hair. "Good night," she whispered back, her hand resting over his heart, feeling the steady beat that had been her companion and her comfort for so many years. And as they drifted into sleep together, the sound of water from the well outside sang softly through the night, a reminder of where their story had begun and a promise that their love would endure for as long as water flowed from stone and life grew from parched earth. The years continued their steady march, bringing changes small and large. More grandchildren arrived, and then great-grandchildren, each one a testament to the foundation Logan and Natalie had built together. The homestead expanded and evolved, incorporating new technologies and methods while maintaining the essential character that reflected its founders' values of hard work, integrity, and love. Logan's body eventually began to fail him, as bodies do. In the winter of 1914, he developed a cough that would not leave, and though Rose treated him with everything medical science had to offer, they all knew the truth. He was 78 years old, and his body had been pushed hard for every one of those years. It was simply wearing out. But his mind remained sharp and his spirit strong, and when the spring came and he was still alive, he insisted on one more trip out to the well with Natalie. Samuel and Thomas helped him outside, supporting his weight as his legs trembled beneath him, and Natalie walked beside him, her hand in his. They sat together on the stone wall surrounding the well in the warm May sunshine, and Logan looked around at everything they had created together. The thriving homestead, the strong barn, the green fields, the healthy cattle grazing in the distance, and most importantly, the family gathered around them, 3 generations of Vances, all of them products of the love between a mountain man and a woman he had saved by digging through rock. "I want you all to remember something," Logan said, his voice weak but clear. "Your grandmother and I built all of this from nothing, from a dying piece of land and a dried-up well and 2 people who had every reason to give up but chose not to. We chose each other, chose love, chose life, and everything good that came after was because of that choice." He paused to catch his breath, and Natalie squeezed his hand, lending him her strength as she had done for so many years. Love is work, Logan continued. Real love is not just a feeling, though feelings matter. It is a choice you make every single day. It is digging through rock when you are exhausted. It is staying when leaving would be easier. It is believing in each other even when times are hard. Your grandmother and I, we had our struggles, our disagreements, our hard times, but we never stopped choosing each other. We never stopped believing that together we were stronger than anything that came against us. And we were right. The family listened in silence, some wiping away tears, all of them understanding that they were receiving a final gift from the man who had shaped all their lives. Take care of each other, Logan said. Take care of this land that has provided for us so faithfully. And take care of your grandmother, who is the strongest person I have ever known, even if she does not always realize it. Logan, Natalie said, her voice breaking, please, do not talk like this is goodbye. Logan turned to look at her, and even with his face gaunt from illness and his body frail from age, his love for her blazed in his eyes, as strong as it had been that first day. Every moment with you has been a gift, Natalie. Every single moment, and I am not afraid of what comes next because I know in my soul that whatever is on the other side, we will find each other again. We found each other once against impossible odds. We will do it again. He lifted his hand to her face, his touch gentle despite the tremor in his fingers. You were dying when I met you, and I could not bear it. I dug through rock for 2 weeks because the thought of a world without you in it was unbearable. And now here we are, decades later, and that has not changed. You are still the water that sustains me, the air that I breathe, the reason my heart beats. That does not end just because this body wears out. Natalie leaned into his touch, tears streaming down her face. I love you. I have loved you from the moment you offered to help a desperate stranger. I will love you until my own heart stops beating, and if there is anything beyond that, I will love you there too. Logan smiled, that gentle smile that had always transformed his rough features into something beautiful. I know. I have always known, just as you have always known how much I love you. He died 3 days later, peacefully in his sleep with Natalie beside him holding his hand. The entire territory seemed to mourn his passing. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched over the decades, people he had helped, guided, supported, and inspired. They buried him on the rise he had chosen, with a view of the homestead and the mountains beyond, just as he had wanted. Natalie stood at the graveside supported by her children, and she did not cry. She had done her crying in private, and now she stood strong, knowing that Logan would have wanted her to be strong. When the last prayer was said, and the last handful of dirt thrown on the coffin, she stepped forward and placed her hand on the fresh earth. Thank you, she whispered, for everything, for seeing me, for saving me, for loving me, for building this beautiful life with me. Rest now, my love. You have earned it. And when my time comes, I will be right here beside you, just as I have been beside you every day of our marriage. She lived for another 8 years, long enough to see great-great-grandchildren born, long enough to see Rose become one of the most respected doctors in New Mexico, long enough to see Samuel turn the homestead into one of the most prosperous properties in the territory. She remained sharp and active, still tending her garden, still overseeing the household, still dispensing wisdom and love to anyone who needed it. But everyone could see that part of her had gone with Logan, and she was simply waiting until it was time to join him. She spoke of him often, always in the present tense, as though he was simply in another room rather than gone. She visited his grave every day without fail, sitting beside the marker and talking to him about the family, about the land, about her day. In the spring of 1922, as the first flowers were blooming in the garden she had planted so many decades before, Natalie went to sleep and did not wake up. She was 70 years old, and she died peacefully with a smile on her face, as though she was seeing something wonderful that no one else could see. They buried her beside Logan on the rise overlooking the homestead, just as they had planned together all those years ago. On her marker, Samuel had inscribed simple words that said everything that needed to be said. Natalie Zimmerman Vance, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She lived because he dug through rock, and together they built a legacy of love. The homestead remained in the Vance family for generations, passed down from Samuel to his children and then to theirs. The well Logan had dug never ran dry, providing water for every generation that followed, a testament to his determination and a symbol of the love that had started it all. And though the house was eventually modernized and expanded, the family always maintained the original cabin as a shrine to their ancestors, keeping it exactly as it had been when Logan and Natalie had lived there. On summer evenings, descendants of Logan and Natalie would sit by the well, watching the sunset just as their ancestors had done, and they would tell the story to their children. The story of a mountain man who saw a woman in need and dug through solid rock for 2 weeks to bring her water. The story of how that woman had fresh water by the time he finished. The story of how that act of service and determination had blossomed into a love that had built an empire and shaped countless lives. And the children would listen with wide eyes, barely able to imagine such strength, such dedication, such love. But they would understand, as each generation understood, that they existed because of that love, that they were living proof that one person's courage and compassion could change the world. The well still stands more than a century after Logan Vance dug it by hand, breaking through rock and clay with nothing but determination and love. Water still flows from it, pure and cold and sweet, just as it did on that first day when Natalie Zimmerman drank and knew she would survive. And if you stand beside it on a quiet evening, when the wind blows just right across the New Mexico desert, you can almost hear them. A man's deep voice and a woman's softer one, talking and laughing together, planning their future, speaking of love and hope, and the beautiful life they built from nothing but water and determination and a heart willing to dig through rock for the person it loved. Their story became legend in Red River and the surrounding territory, a tale told and retold, embroidered and romanticized, but never losing its essential truth. Real love does not require grand gestures or dramatic declarations, though those have their place. Real love is steady and strong, and willing to do the hard work, the dirty work, the work that takes weeks of backbreaking labor with no guarantee of success. Real love digs through rock when someone needs water. Real love stays when it could leave. Real love builds something lasting and good that outlives the people who created it. Logan Vance and Natalie Zimmerman. Vance understood that truth, lived that truth, and left behind a legacy that continues to ripple outward through time. Their descendants carry their blood and their values, their determination and their capacity for love. The land they saved continues to thrive, feeding and sustaining generation after generation. And the well, that miraculous well that started everything, continues to give its gift of water to anyone who needs it, just as Logan and Natalie gave their gifts of love and strength and perseverance to everyone they touched. In the end, their story is simple. A man saw a woman who needed help. He helped her, not for reward or recognition, but because it was right. That help became respect. Respect became friendship. Friendship became love, and love became a life, a family, a legacy that will endure as long as water flows from stone, and people remember that the greatest strength is not found in muscle or might, but in the willingness to dig through rock for someone you love. That is the story of Logan and Natalie Vance. That is the story of a mountain man who dug through rock and clay for 2 weeks so that a dying woman could have fresh water by the time he finished. That is the story of how love can transform not just 2 lives, but hundreds of lives across multiple generations. And it all started with a well, a desperate woman, a compassionate man, and the simple, profound truth that real love is always willing to do the work.